Hey guys, welcome to another episode here on bringspark.com. My guest today is an internationally renowned success coach. He's a best-selling author behind books like You Can Have What You Want, Supercoach, of course, one of his most amazing books, The Inside Out Revolution, which I got as an audiobook. All of these are strongly recommended. The Inside Out Revolution is on a different level than most of the books I have on my phone and in my bookshelf as well. So check that out. His books have been translated into 15 languages or so. He spent the last 25 plus years as a mentor and a coach for anything from celebrities and royalties to CEOs and people who want to make more out of their lives and achieve more success, create businesses or whatever else. He's the founder of the International Supercoach Academy, which teaches coaching from the inside out. He does a weekly talk show, I believe, on HeyHouseRadio.com. And he did an amazing TED Talk, which is called Why Aren't We Awesomer, which I really recommend that you guys check out. On a personal note, and he doesn't know this yet, the book, You Can Have What You Want, was the first thing I read from our guest, Michael Neill. I read it in 2007, and it inspired me to sit down and figure out what do I really want. 2 years later, inspired by my answer to that question, I launched my own coaching company, and I've been doing it ever since. I haven't looked back. And so for me, both professionally and personally, it's a great honor to have Michael Neill here with us today. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here. I didn't know the backstory, but it's always nice when you talk to somebody who has some idea who you are.
There you go. Yeah, I've been looking at your stuff since the first time I read that book in 2007. So I really like what you have to say. So I was happy that we could connect and get you on here. So let's start out with the basics, but probably the most important part. What is the Inside Out Revolution?
Well, it is the obvious question, and of course it's the hardest question to answer in some ways. But the fundamental notion of where our experience of life comes from, that we have culturally, it's been around for thousands of years. It's not like we in 21st century Europe or America have, is based on a misunderstanding. And it's a misunderstanding that is biological, that is psychological, and that is spiritual. And it's the idea that our experience of life comes at us from the outside world, and then we have our experience on the inside. And it is as inaccurate as the idea that all the planets and the sun revolved around the earth. And it leads to the same difficulties that false model, the Ptolemaic model of the universe, led to. The math never worked. They had to cancel Christmas every 10 years to shift the calendar. It just didn't work, but because we were so sure that was how it worked, we just made allowances for it. Well, because we are so sure that our experience of life, our happiness, our feelings of fulfillment, our connection to others must be based on them and what happens and what we get and what circumstances we're surrounded by. We design our entire lives to try and get more dominion over circumstance, to try and get more control over others or over ourselves or however we find to try and deal with it. Well, the truth is our experience of life is 100% created via thought and these two other aspects of mind, consciousness and sort of like an intelligence behind the system. And so what makes it an inside-out revolution in the sense of the Copernican revolution, where we suddenly realized, the fundamental model is wrong, is that it turns out that 90 to 95% of what people do is based on where they think their happiness comes from and where they think their suffering comes from. And when people start to see the truth, which is that it is all created from the inside out via thought, mind, and consciousness, the whole game changes. There's still a game, but it's a completely different set of rules.
Absolutely. And it seems to me, because I've talked to a lot of people about this, and people still kind of get caught up in their application thinking when it comes to this. But this type of thinking, this paradigm doesn't really as far as I can see, work on an application base. I mean, I know you have a past. You did NLP coaching for a long time. You're very skilled at that, and that's a very application based approach. So how is this the inside out thinking different than application based coaching or practice or whatever you want to call it?
Sure. No, most application based coaching, or whatever we want to call it, is an attempt to answer the question, how shall I live? Like, how should I live my life? Given my understanding of how the world works, how shall I live? And transformative coaching, the type of coaching, the conversation I talk about in the Inside Out Revolution is an attempt to answer the question, how life works. Now, as my understanding of how life works gets more accurate, how shall I live begins to answer itself. So in a way, it's the difference between a conversation about physics and engineering. People want to have an engineering conversation with faulty physics. With the best will in the world, I can give you a recipe based on my understanding of physics, and if you follow it exactly, it might well work for you. But if anything is different to my recipe, if the temperature is a little bit off, if your ingredients are a little bit different to my ingredients, if somebody comes into the kitchen halfway through and you miss a step, you've got nothing. And the problem with applications is we think, well, this must be right, so if it's not working, it's me. So I know this is how it works, because everybody keeps telling me, oh, you set goals and you believe in yourself and so if it doesn't work, well, oh, I'm broken. Well, no, if you're using junk physics, junk science, you're going to struggle when you try and apply it. It's not you, it's a misunderstanding. And so that's really that's the fundamental difference, and that's why it's not that there aren't applications, it's that you're kind of not the one applying them. Like once you've got the physics down, or as down as you're going to get it, the engineering will become obvious to you. Like if I know that if I drop this cup, it's going to fall to the ground and break, well, it's pretty easy for me to figure out how to stop the cup from breaking. Right? It's pretty easy for me if my goal is to have it break, it's pretty easy for me to know how to do that. I don't need a strategy for breaking the cup. But if I think that cups are supposed to float when you let go of them, I'm going to have a lot of broken cups and a lot of confusion about what I did in a past life, leading to my having to pay off this karma of all these broken cups. And it's just an understanding, but it's an understanding with such profound implications that the application takes care of itself.
Absolutely. So basically what I'm hearing you say is that as soon as you have the understanding of how things really work, then doing what you should be doing or need to do comes naturally after that. Is that about right?
It is, but part of why that is because there is a inbuilt spiritual guidance system, like a GPS for the soul, right? You can have what you want was my first book, and the working title of it was Soul Path, because even though it's not a overtly spiritual book, it was just pointing out something I'd learned in, at that point, I guess it was probably about 15, 16 years of working with clients, which is the ones who were really happily successful never worked to a plan. They might have had a plan, but they were following a sort of an inner guidance system, and things would unfold step by step as if by design. I don't know if there's a design, but it would unfold as if by design. And I called that the soul path, the path of the soul, because it was almost like that deepest part of us was laying the path out for us. When you start to see that GPS is already in you, it's already working perfectly, and all it's doing when you ignore it is going, recalculating, and then giving you a new route to get where you're designed to go. We relax into it in the same way as if I know my GPS works, I don't have to go crazy trying to, Google Maps and MapQuest and figure out the thing and make sure I've got the right directions and what do I do here and when am I going to turn and all the kind of things that If I don't have a GPS, I have to do. Well, when you start to see that there is not only a GPS, but it's way better than the one in your car. Like it's because it knows where you need to go. It's not just telling you how to get where you want to go. It's actually will take you to a life beyond your imagination. And that's, I think, one of the big revelations to people. And it was a big revelation to me is my best goals sucked compared to what life had in mind for me.
That's very interesting. And I know a lot of people wonder how they can, because I had a client of mine when I introduced him to your book and Jamie Smart's Clarity and a few other of these, he came back to me and said, okay, so I get it, but how do I use it? And that to me was an amusing question because, first of all, I feel like you answered, both you and Jamie and everyone else answer that. But as you said, it's not, it's not an application thing and it's not a thing you go and use, but it's something that, I don't know, to me it seems to happen when you have a good enough understanding. What would you answer that question? If someone came to you and said, I read your book, I saw your talks, how do I use it?
So here's what I hear in that question. It's a very common question. It would be like if somebody read the manual for the GPS in their car and then gone, well, this is really interesting. How do I use the manual? Well, no, the manual was talking about something that's already built into the system. So if the question is, how do I use the GPS? Well, that you can kind of answer. Listen to it and do what it says. When something occurs to you and it's got a nice feeling to it, it's got a kind of seems to come from a quiet place inside you, follow it and see what happens. Right? There is an answer to that question. It's kind of an obvious answer, but it is an answer. There's no answer to, well, how do I use the manual? Well, the manual is only there to get you to realize there's a GPS system. Once you realize there's a GPS system, put the manual away and start engaging with the GPS. Once you begin to understand that there is this deeper wisdom inside you, that there's a self-correcting mechanism, that there is this amazing creative force that we're calling thought that is creating your entire reality moment by moment, and that you can think whatever you want. You're not stuck with any thinking about anything. Well, now you're in a whole different world. Now if you have how do I questions, they're at least based on some reality. They're based on a physics that works. They're based on how your mind works and how reality works. They're not based on, given all these false assumptions about how life works, how do I apply it? Or given, I think of it as fingers pointing. Like, we're all pointing to the same thing. Jamie, Garrett, me, anyone who's teaching the principles, we're pointing to a fundamental truth about life. What happens is people get very enamored of one finger, or they go, well, why does your finger bend at this angle? And should I make my finger bend at that angle when I'm pointing? And ooh, I think his finger is much nicer than his finger. It's like, it's not about the finger. It's about where we're pointing. And I think that would be how I would address that. It's natural, it's normal at least, but it isn't about applying an understanding. It's about relaxing into this amazing human design and beginning to get the most out of it. It's like if you have a car and you don't understand about gears, you can have a Ferrari, but if you're driving it in first gear, it's not that great a car. Well, we're just kind of showing you there's other gears. Mm. You figure out where you want to drive. I have no stake in where you want to drive.
That's perfect. Now, I know that you have quite a story personally as well. You've done a lot of interesting stuff in your life, and you arrived at this understanding at some point. I would love it if you could tell us a little bit about your personal story and also how it led you to discovering this and to embrace it and what it's done for you, basically.
I always hesitate to tell it only because it starts to sound like a story. Right? And this was my life. I mean, yes, it's the story of my life, but I was a depressed and suicidal teen. I had no reason to be. Nice life. Parents loved me. It was all good theoretically, but my brain didn't work. My brain chemistry wasn't very good. And I really suffered a lot. And I dealt with that as best I could through drink and through drugs, and never anything too ridiculous, but enough. And I had my first insight in the midst of a psychotic break from reality, where I was in my dorm room, and this is in the Why Aren't We Awesomer talk, but I was in my dorm room, and it really felt to me like I was being sucked out of my 4th story window by a giant vacuum cleaner in the sky. I get that sounds nuts. At the time, it seemed real. And the epiphany that I had the next morning was I didn't want to kill myself. I just thought I did. And that was huge, because I had assumed that if I thought about killing myself all the time, it must mean I wanted to. I didn't realize that thought is just this creative energy, and it's transient, and it's like water. It takes on the shape of whatever you pour it into. And it's fluid. It's not solid. But like water, it can freeze at certain temperatures, and it can appear solid. And so for the first time in my life, I didn't take my thinking to heart. It wasn't that I changed my thinking. It wasn't that I got better at controlling my thinking. I just realized, it's just thought. It'd be like, I've always heard about the War of the Worlds radio broadcast that Orson Welles did, where, people thought this was real, that we were really being attacked by aliens, and they'd get in their car and they drove out and they panicked and they phoned loved ones to say goodbye. And it was like, once they realized it was just a radio show, they didn't need therapy. They didn't need to make the radio show change. They didn't need to rewrite the script. Once they realized it was a radio show, they felt a little bit sheepish. They went home. They had a nice dinner. Hopefully had sex with somebody they liked and went to bed. Right? It was suddenly saying, I don't have to take my psychology to heart. I have a psychology. Everyone does. It's part of what happens as we grow up. But it isn't me. And when you start to see that nature of thought, that it's just this transient energy that creates forms and looks real and then doesn't, suddenly that opens up a space to feel that deeper intelligence, that deeper wisdom come through. And so for me, the way it manifested is, instead of having a really, really good idea every 7 years, I began to see more and more, I get how this works. Now, I got how it worked within the wrong model. So I still lived in an outside-in world, but it seemed to me that, whereas at first it was like the quality of my life was what happened to me, I then got to what I call like the enlightened outside in, where I could see that the quality of my thinking impacted how I felt. So it was almost like I thought of thought as a layer between me and the world. So the world was happening to me, but if I thought about it right, it didn't hurt so much. And that was better. And I taught that for 15 years with full integrity, because I thought, well, given that the earth is the center of the universe, this is the best you can do. So I was not looking for anything more other than the fact that I just kept hoping in the back of my mind that there was something better. It was like, I was okay with it. I genuinely thought, look, I'm a really high-functioning, depressive, neurotic guy. I can do that. I was very successful. I knew I helped a lot of people, so I felt good about that. I had a nice marriage, a nice family. But I was aware that I was about 2 weeks away from sinking back into suicidal depression if I wasn't on it. Now, I was on it. Like, I did my behavioral Prozac. I did my meditation. I did my exercise. I did all the things I had learned helped. And I just thought, well, I'm fundamentally broken, but okay. So when I had my big insight in 2007 that I talk about in the Inside Out Revolution, that well-being is our nature, that we were born happy, that same well-being that we had when we were born is still there. It just covered over with a lot of thinking that doesn't look like thinking. I was liberated personally, but I was totally messed up professionally. Because I built my career on teaching people how to manage the outside in, how to manage their thinking so that the world wouldn't get to them and so that they could impact the world. And I saw that the fundamental premise of my work was just wrong. That made for a very awkward book tour for the Happy Map, which was all about how to control your thinking to be happy. But by the same token, I couldn't go back and try and make the case once I saw it. It was innocent. Once you see that the planets don't revolve around the Earth, you can't keep making the arguments. And once I saw that well-being was our nature, it wasn't an achievement. It wasn't the product of good practices. It was just who we are when it all quiets down inside. Well, that whole aspect of my life, everything in my life that I was doing in order to be happy, started to fall away. Because why would I keep doing it? If I think, I keep using this mug, but like if I think in order to be happy, I have to always hold this mug to my cheek, right? And people comment on it, but after a while they get used to the fact that you're going, hey, how you doing? Shaking left-handed. And then I find out that actually this has nothing to do with why I'm happy. At some point, I'm just going to put it down. And it's no big deal. It just doesn't make sense to hold it up anymore. And so many of the practices that I used to use and the techniques that I used to use with clients just fell away because it became obvious they weren't the reason that people were changing. And they weren't the reason that I was happy and successful. And that's a version of my story. That's how I got here.
That's perfect. And I know that you and your Supercoach Academy, you educate coaches on how to coach through the inside out understanding. So what's the major points that are different from traditional coaching and coaching from the inside out? What can you say about that?
There are a few, and they're pretty fundamental. So most coaching, I'd say the goal of actually most good coaching is similar. It is about bringing more out of a person than they can bring out of themselves. So I think in that sense, that's what makes something coaching as opposed to therapy. It's not fixing something that's broken. It's going, hey, you're capable of more than you are bringing forth. Let us help you bring forth more. So in that sense, coaching is coaching. But empowered coaching, empowerment coaching, which is the primary model, is I will show you how to. I will give you strategies for success. I will give you recipes. I will take your broken ass and give you things that will let you succeed despite how broken you are and how limited you are and all that. Or you get sort of what I call the enlightened outside-in coaching, which is I will teach you how to think about yourself so that even though you're broken, you'll think that you're not, and then you'll do well. And it's not that you can't get results that way. Of course you can, or coaching wouldn't have existed for thousands of years, right? It's that when you show somebody that they've got 6 gears, not 2, that just changes the game forever. You can also then teach them some driving tricks, but the driving tricks are useless till you know how to get out of second gear. In a way, transformative coaching is more like somebody showing you how your iPhone works. It's like you've got this really cool device and you're only using it to make calls, and it can do so much more than that. And so you're really just educating somebody about their potential, not from a go get a tiger point of view or believe in yourself point of view, literally just showing them how it works. I don't need to believe in my iPhone. I just need to know how it works. You don't need to believe in your capacity. You just need to know how it works, and you'll discover your capacity. And it's huge, and it's so far beyond what most people ever touch. And that's the funny thing, is like, you really can do amazing things from an empowered will, making yourself do stuff, but it's exhausting. You can't sustain, or you have to work so hard to sustain that whether it's in 5 years or 25 years, you're going to burn out. You're going to give up. You're going to get to that point where you go, is this all there is? And rethink your life and have your midlife crisis and however it manifests for you. Well, it's the difference between, if I'm walking down I use this analogy, I think, and you can have what you want, but if I'm walking down a dry riverbed barefoot with a canoe on my head, I can get somewhere, but it's going to be hard. If I know that in an hour that riverbed will fill with flowing water, then I can just wait for it, put my canoe down, get in, and I'll get not only further, but I'll get there with so much less effort, with so much less struggle, and I won't be beat up when I arrive, so I'll be up for doing it again the next day and seeing where it's been. But if I don't know there's a river, I'm going to carry the boat because I'm determined, because I'm empowered. Look, good for you, right? You're not going to get anywhere if you don't want to. But if you want to get somewhere, better to take the river than the rocky path.
Absolutely. So how would, because I got this question from an NLP coach that I was talking about a couple of weeks ago, and she asked me, well, having a better understanding of something is all well and good, but how do you actually coach if you're not giving tools, if you're not running drills, if you're not, and she was kind of perplexed about the whole idea of coaching for understanding versus coaching for application.
A lot of it, and this is why it's difficult, because if you're listening for technique, even a question like that, how do I coach for understanding, is still listening for the technique of coaching for understanding. So you're still stuck in that same question. How do I do it? Not what happens. See, if you look at what happens, we have that the wisdom, the self-knowledge of how things work and what's possible is already in us. So one of the reasons, the main reason I would say that we don't hear it, is we don't know it's there, so we never look there. Sid Banks, who is the first person to articulate these principles that we teach, he said at one point, he said, for 20 plus years, I've been telling people to look inside themselves, but they never do. We go look for somebody else to tell us to look inside ourselves, or we go look for, somebody else to tell us how to do it. Well, when you're listening with nothing on your mind, when you're listening from your connection to this larger intelligence, your connection to this universal consciousness, to this space where miracles happen, is what I call it. People naturally, as they speak with you, relax into that in themselves. So I talked to a Zen master about it years ago, and I was very interested in this idea in Zen of transmission, that they say the Dharma, the truth, can be transmitted from the Zen master to the student. And I was like, how do you do that? Because I still had my NLP hat on. How do you do it? And he said, well, there's something awake in me that is asleep in most people. Now, I would describe that as a divine spark, a spiritual presence, a deeper soul. I don't know what it is, but it's there. Everyone kind of knows it. They kind of feel it. They sense it. They intuit it. And he said, so when people hang out with me, that thing that's awake in me wakes up in them for a minute. And they feel it, and it feels amazing to be awake to that. And they associate that with me. But what he does in his work is he sends them away to meditate. He sends them away to try and get in touch with that even when they're not with him. And he said, over time, through presence and practice, and that's again his model. Sometimes through grace, like just luck, happy accident, that thing that is awake in me wakes up in them and doesn't go back to sleep. And at that point, transmission is said to have taken place, even though nothing ever passed between us. Well, that's more the nature of this conversation. What we are awake to in ourselves, our clients begin to wake up to in themselves. And then their life changes because they're no longer driving in second gear. They're no longer trying to manually override the GPS, to take over the steering in the car that drives itself. And their life begins to change for the better. And in ways that are way beyond usually what the goals they brought to the coaching are, but include often achieving the goals they brought to the coaching. Sometimes not, because sometimes the goal is stupid. Like sometimes once they're not trying to do something they think will make them happy, a lot of the goals fall away anyway. And so that's the difference, is it's not really me giving you something you don't have. It's me showing you something that's always been there, that because of a misunderstanding that's not even usually your misunderstanding, it's a cultural misunderstanding, you just never noticed. Or you noticed, but you made up some other reason why it happened.
Right.
Yeah.
So in your book, The Inside Out Revolution, you talk about a conversation you have with someone who had this insight. And it was one of my favorite parts of the book, and it was about how it helps people and what changes in them. And you said something about, I can't remember exactly, but I read it as they start using more periods instead of commas when they're thinking. Could you elaborate on that so people understand what I'm talking about?
There's a thing so in the book, the way I talk about it is more periods, less commas, or more full stops, less commas.
There you go.
So instead of thinking, I'm really upset, comma, and I shouldn't be upset, comma, so I need to do something to be less upset, comma, or I'm going to ruin my marriage, comma, and then I'm going to get fired from work, comma, and anyways, it's not really my fault, comma, because it's really them that made me angry, comma. It's like, well, when it doesn't look like it works that way, the thought in my head is, boy, I'm really upset. Full stop. So what? At some point you won't, because that's the nature of it. It comes and goes like clouds. Thoughts come, thoughts go. It doesn't mean anything. So I sometimes talk about it as the difference between before the therefore and after the therefore. So when we talk about truth, we're talking about what exists before the comma, before the therefore. So people get upset and then they're okay again. People have innate well-being. There's a guidance system, a spiritual intelligence that will guide us if we let it. Those are just observable truths. Now, as soon as you get into there is a spiritual guidance system, therefore we must worship according to this system. Now you're getting into the thought-created world, and we're going to have differences of opinion over there. I'm upset right now, therefore I need to fix it. Now we're into this made-up idea of how we should be, not how we are. And all conflict exists after the therefore, and all truth exists before the therefore. And so it's not that you're not going to think. It's not that you're not going to make stuff up. It's not that you're not going to, get upset from time to time and all of that. It's that that's not where the money is, right? That's not where the juice is. That's not where the good stuff is. All the good stuff, everything you're really after exists before the therefore. And so you just become less interested. Not disinterested, not apathetic, but just less interested in after the therefore. I still love a good conversation in the pub over a pint of ale, but that's what it is. It's a pub conversation. It's not a meaningful conversation. Right? What we're talking about, the transformative conversation, is a meaningful conversation about the nature of life and what it is to be human. And that's what transforms people's lives. Not coming to an agreement about how we should do things.
So you've mentioned a couple of times now the difference between, trying to be what you think you should be and being what you actually are. Now, what would you say to the people who have objections like, they experience themselves as depressed or maybe very angry or whatever, and that's how they think they are, that's how they experience themselves as being, and they don't want to be that, they want to be something else. How would you deal with a client like that who came to you with that problem?
Well, it's always going to be different, right? One of the first, if somebody wants the really short version of Supercoach Academy, right, you want the model, it's show up, respond to what shows up. That's how you coach. Now, how you respond to what shows up and even what shows up turns out to be a function of your grounding and your understanding, and that's what all the training is about. But really, you don't know till you're sitting down with another human being. But generally speaking, when I hear somebody say, I'm depressed and I don't want to be depressed. I'm angry and I don't want to be angry. It's a bit like somebody coming and saying, there's 3 feet of snow on the ground. There have been 3 feet of snow on the ground for 4 months and I'm sick of it. I want the snow to go away. It will. Now, one of the reasons that it's taking so long is because you think that it's something to do with what's out there. And so you're putting all this energy into trying to sort out what's out there. Or you think it's something broken in here and you're trying to put all your energy into fixing what's broken in here. And so you're not allowing for it, slows the process down. So an analogy that just came to me this morning in the shower, funnily enough, because I was talking with somebody and they were like, how do I remember this? And you don't have to remember it because you will be reminded of it when you need to. In the same way as I don't need to remember not to lean too far forward so that I don't fall and hit my face, because at some point the natural proprioceptive system of the body will catch me and bring me back to center. Now, if I don't know that, I'm probably going to be very scared of falling. I'm probably going to spend a lot of time very stiff and avoiding falling. And of course, that's going to reinforce the idea that, no, it's not going to catch me because I fell once. It's the same thing with our emotional life. It's not that we don't feel emotions. It's not that we might not have at some point have an experience of being so overwhelmed by it that we did some damage, usually completely unintentionally. It's that once you know that every single time my body will catch me, unless I manually override it, it will never let me fall on my face. Well, then I don't have to worry about it. Then I'm free to lean forward as far as I want. I'm free to be as angry as I am. I'm free to be as depressed as I am, because it's going to change before it gets out of hand. And it's really hard, especially with depression, because you can sit in depression for years. I did. I had 7 years before I had my insight. But it was because I didn't know what I was dealing with. I didn't know it was made of thought. I thought it was made of brain chemistry. Now, there was a physiological component to it, right? My serotonin levels were so low that the doctor said you should be dead. But you know what? The next day after I had my insight, my serotonin levels were back to normal. I'm not saying don't treat it, because everyone's different, and it may be that in the short term that's a fantastic thing to do. I'm saying that we live in a thought-created experience of reality, and it's going to change when thought changes.
So to pull this into a everyday situation that I guess pretty much everyone can identify with, something happens, or whatever it is, at some point during your day, you feel angry. You feel very angry. And traditional coaching, the way I'd experienced it, is they give you techniques to be less angry in the moment, things, reframing or whatever it is. While you're saying if you leave it alone, it's going to take care of itself. It's going to help you get back to your natural state. Is that about right?
Well, yeah, it's like not wanting to ever be angry is like not wanting to ever lean left. It's one of the things that we do from time to time. Now, if I'm always leaning left, that's probably because I'm really worried about leaning left, or I have some fundamental misunderstanding about where my experience is coming from, so it looks to me like I have to lean left all the time. As I sort of come into balance with things, the fact that, of course, I'm always out of balance. I'm always slightly leaning in some direction or other. Doesn't mean I don't know what centered feels like. Doesn't mean the fact that I might be angry doesn't mean I'm not also in my well-being. The fact that I might be sad doesn't mean I'm not also in my well-being. The fact that I might be happy doesn't mean I'm also not in my well-being. The well-being's the ground in which all these other emotions arise. It's the sky in which all of this weather appears. So if I know that, what's wrong with being angry every now and again? What's the big deal? Well, I might hurt somebody. Well, don't. Right? There's nothing in anger that makes you hurt people. Right? It's this idea that I feel this and it's connected to this, and therefore I have to do something about this in order to change this. Well, yeah, then you're going to hurt somebody because it looks to you like you've got to change it. What's wrong with being scared sometimes? Fear is the most irrelevant of the emotions, right? We spend so much time, I have spent so much of my life worrying about and wrestling with and battling with and trying to make friends with fear. Fear's leaning right. Sometimes I lean right. Sometimes I don't. Who gives it? It doesn't matter, right? It's just one of the things that comes up sometimes. Now,
yeah, I was going to say, and that fear is one of the things that I see that most people let kind of hold them back and let them, they want to start a business or they want to travel, quit their job and travel the world or whatever it is that they have, but they're scared to do it. And so they try to figure out how to not be scared or how to deal with it when they are scared or how to, and I know you work with business a lot. You work with people who are already in business or people who want to start their own business. How do you help them get from the place of being worried about being scared or being worried about failing to knowing how to relate to it?
Well, you can't solve a feeling, right? A feeling just isn't a problem to be solved. It's what certain thinking feels like. So it's like it would be to think that I need to. Here's an analogy I've sometimes used. So imagine that fear is a person in a red shirt. So to say that I can't move forward until I deal with my fear is like saying I can only move forward if nobody in a red shirt comes into my world today. And if they're in my world, I can't really do anything until they leave. It doesn't work that way. Now, if I think it does, then of course I'm going to engage with and wrestle with and beat up and fear the people in the red shirts. But when I start to see that sometimes I feel scared and sometimes I don't, and the variable is thought, not red shirts, well then I'm done. It's sometimes I'm scared and I move forward. Sometimes I'm not scared and I move forward. Sometimes I'm so scared I don't move forward for a minute, but then I'm not and then I do. I think with emotion, what happens is we either try and overcome it or we elevate it to godlike status. So we either go, I don't need those emotions. I should be above them. I should be spiritual. I should be empowered. I don't need to feel this stuff, which is garbage because you think, and that's part of thinking. Or we go, I'm scared. That means, therefore, I must do this. I'm sad, therefore I must do that. I'm angry, therefore I must do that. And it's just, it really is like people in different colored t-shirts. Gonna happen, not a problem. But if I think it is, I can make it one. And then I'll be right. And that's the problem with even the best empowerment coaching. It reinforces my idea that people in red shirts are problems, but it teaches me how to handle them much, much better. See, that ultimately to me doesn't seem that useful. It's very exciting to feel like you've overcome something like that. It is. It feels great. But you didn't have to, it wasn't true in the first place. So the fact that you made it true and then overcame it is an interesting way to spend your time.
That's very true. Okay, well, we're getting to the end of this, so I want to thank you again for being here a lot. Where should people go to find more information about this, about you, about your programs, all of this stuff?
Well, there's three places to come. Supercoach.com is my sandbox on the web. So that's where everything ultimately winds up on Supercoach.com. I write weekly tips that people can get for free just by signing up. We have an online community. We do short programs. We do a weekly radio show. All of that stuff's free and available, and you can just go exploring. CoachingFromTheInsideOut.com is an online program that was based on a live program for coaches. So it's sort of a home study program in Inside Out Coaching. But really, we put that out there as a taster for supercoachacademy.com, which is if this resonates with people, that's where we share it, where it's for people who want to go deeper in this understanding, whether they want to formally be coaches or whether they just want to be able to bring this to the people in their life that they care about. And so those are sort of my three little homes on the web.
Perfect. And I know you do some public speaking every now and then. I know you were coming to Oslo, where I live, in the end of May 22nd, and you travel around a lot. Is there a place for people to find a schedule, or do you keep
So I went on my website just before this call because I figured you'd ask that question, and I realized to my horror we don't really have on the website right now. So hopefully by the time you've watched this, we'll have fixed it and you'll find it. But if not, in the weekly newsletters, we have the calendar of upcoming events. So weekly newsletter, but also it will get to the website. I don't know why.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for being here, Michael. I really appreciate your time and your insights, and I'm pretty sure our viewers have too. Guys watching this, there are going to be links on the webpage to all of the sites that Michael's mentioned. Go check them out. Let us know what you think about the interview. Get in touch with his newsletter and his websites and anything, because this stuff, if you don't already know what it is, you really should look even deeper into it than what we've had the chance to do in this talk. Michael, thank you very much for being here.
Really nice to meet you. It's been fun.
Me too.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.